THE POESY OF SCALDS. I. A certain man was named ^Egir or Hler. He dwelt on the island which is now called Hler's Isle, and was deeply versed in black magic. He took his way to Asgard, but the ^sir had foreknowledge of his journey. He was received with good cheer, and yet many things were done by deceit, with eye illusions. And at evening, when it was time for drinking, Odin had swords brought into the hall so bright that light radiated from them, and other illumination was not used while they sat at drinking. Then the ^sir came in to their banquet, and in the high seat sat them down those 12 ^sir who were appointed to be judges. These were their names: Thor, Njordr, Freyr, Tyr, Heimdallr, Bragi, Vidar, Vali, Ullr, Hcenir, Forseti, Loki; and in like manner the Asynjur: Frigg, Freyja, Gefjun, Idun, Gerdr, Sigyn, Fula, Nanna. It seemed glorious to ^Egir to look about him in the hall. The wainscotings there were all hung with fair shields; there was also stinging mead copiously quaffed. The man seated next to ^Egir was Bragi, and they took part together in drinking and in converse. Bragi told ^Egir of many things which had come to pass among the ^sir. He began the story at the point where 3 of the ^sir, Odin and Loki and Hcenir, departed from home and were wandering over mountains and wastes, and food was hard to find. But when they came down into a certain dale, they saw a herd of oxen, took one ox, and set about cooking it. Now when they thought that it must be cooked, they broke up the fire, and it was not cooked. After a while had passed, they having scattered the fire a second time, and it was not cooked, they took counsel together, asking each other what it might mean. Then they heard a voice speaking in the oak up above them, declaring that he who sat there confessed that he had caused the lack of virtue in the fire. They looked thither, and there sat an eagle, and it was no small one. Then the eagle said: "If ye are willing to give me my fill of the ox, then it will cook in the fire." They assented to this. Then he let himself float down from the tree, and alighted by the fire, and forthwith, at the very first, took unto himself the 2 hams of the ox and both shoulders. Then Loki was angered, snatched up a great pole, brandished it with all his strength, and drove it at the eagle's body. The eagle plunged violently at the blow, and flew up, so that the pole was fast to the eagle's back, and Loki's hands to the other end of the pole. The eagle flew at such a height that Loki's feet down below knocked against stones and rock heaps and trees, and he thought his arms would be torn from his shoulders. He cried aloud, entreating the eagle urgently for peace, but the eagle declared that Loki should never be loosed unless he would give him his oath to induce Idun to come out of Asgard with her apples. Loki assented, and being straightway loosed, went to his companions. Nor for that time are any more things reported concerning their journey until they had come home. But at the appointed time Loki lured Idun out of Asgard into a certain wood, saying that he had found such apples as would seem to her of great virtue, and prayed that she would have her apples with her, and compare them with these. Then Thjazi the giant came there in his eagle's plumage, and took Idun, and flew away with her, off into Thrymheimr to his abode. But the ^sir became straitened at the disappearance of Idun, and speedily they became hoary and old. Then those ^sir took counsel together, and each asked the other what had last been known of Idun, and the last that had been seen was that she had gone out of Asgard with Loki. Thereupon Loki was seized and brought to the Thing, and was threatened with death or tortures. When he had become well frightened, he declared that he would seek after Idun in Jotunheim if Freyja would lend him the hawk's plumage which she possessed. And when he got the hawk's plumage, he flew north into Jotunheim, and came on a certain day to the home of Thjazi the giant. Thjazi had rowed out to sea, but Idun was at home alone. Loki turned her into the shape of a nut, and grasped her in his claws and flew his utmost. Now when Thjazi came home and missed Idun, he took his eagle's plumage and flew after Loki, making a mighty rush of sound with his wings in his flight. But when the ^sir saw how the hawk flew with the nut, and where the eagle was flying, They went out below Asgard and bore burdens of plane shavings thither. As soon as the hawk flew into the citadel, he swooped down close by the castle wall; then the ^sir struck fire to the plane shavings. But the eagle could not stop himself when he missed the hawk; the feathers of the eagle caught fire, and straightway his flight ceased. Then the ^sir were near at hand, and slew Thjazi the giant within the gate of the ^sir, and that slaying is exceeding famous. Now Skadi, the daughter of the giant Thjazi, took helm and birnie and all weapons of war, and proceeded to Asgard to avenge her father. The ^sir, however, offered her reconciliation and atonement. The first article was that she should choose for herself a husband from among the ^sir, and choose by the feet only, seeing no more of him. Then she saw the feet of one man passing fair, and said: "I choose this one; in Baldr little can be loathly." But that was Njordr of Noatun. She had this article also in her bond of reconciliation, that the ^sir must do a thing she thought they would not be able to accomplish, to make her laugh. Then Loki did this: he tied a cord to the beard of a goat, the other end being about his own genitals, and each gave way in turn, and each of the two screeched loudly. Then Loki let himself fall onto Skadi's knee, and she laughed. Thereupon reconciliation was made with her on the part of the ^sir. It is so said that Odin did this by way of atonement to Skadi: he took Thjazi's eyes and cast them up into the heavens, and made of them two stars. Then said ^gir: "It seems to me that Thjazi was a mighty man. Now of what family was he?" Bragi answered: "His father was called Olvaldi; and if I tell thee of him, thou wilt think these things wonders. He was very rich in gold, but when he died and his sons came to divide the inheritance, they determined upon this measure for the gold which they divided: each should take as much as his mouth would hold, and all the same number of mouthfuls. One of them was Thjazi, the second Idi, the third Gangr. And we have it as a metaphor among us now, to call gold the mouth tale of these giants; but we conceal it in secret terms or in poesy in this way, that we call it speech, or word, or talk of these giants." Then said ^gir: "I deem that well concealed in secret terms." And again said ^gir: "Whence did this art, which ye call poesy, derive its beginnings?" Bragi answered: "These were the beginnings thereof. The gods had a dispute with the folk which are called Vanir, and they appointed a peace meeting between them, and established peace in this way: they each went to a vat and spat their spittle therein. Then at parting the gods took that peace token, and would not let it perish, but shaped thereof a man. This man is called Kvasir, and he was so wise that none could question him concerning anything but that he knew the solution. He went up and down the earth to give instruction to men, and when he came upon invitation to the abode of certain dwarves, Fjalar and Galar, they called him into privy converse with them, and killed him, letting his blood run into two vats and a kettle. The kettle is called Odrerir, and the vats Son and Bodn. They blended honey with the blood, and the outcome was that mead by the virtue of which he who drinks becomes a skald or scholar. The dwarves reported to the ^sir that Kvasir had choked on his own shrewdness, since there was none so wise there as to be able to question his wisdom. Then these dwarves invited the giant, who is called Gillingr, to visit them, and his wife with him. Next the dwarves invited Gillingr to row upon the sea with them. But when they had gone out from the land, the dwarves rowed into the breakers and capsized the boat. Gillingr was unable to swim, and he perished, but the dwarves righted their boat and rowed to land. They reported this accident to his wife, but she took it grievously and wept aloud. Then Fjalar asked her whether it would ease her heart if she should look out upon the sea at the spot where he had perished, and she desired it. Then he spoke softly to Galarr his brother, bidding him go up over the doorway, when she should go out, and let a millstone fall on her head, saying that her weeping grew wearisome to him; and even so he did. Now when the giant Suttungr, Gillingr's son, learned of this, he went over and took the dwarves and carried them out to sea, and set them on a reef which was covered at high tide. They besought Suttungr to give them respite of their lives, and as the price of reconciliation offered him the precious mead in satisfaction of his father's death, and that became a means of reconciliation between them. Suttungr carried the mead home and concealed it in the place called Hnitbjorg, placing his daughter Gunnlod there to watch over it. Because of this we call poesy Kvasir's blood, or dwarves' drink, or fill, or any kind of liquid of Odrerir, or of Bodn, or of Son, or a ferry boat of dwarves, since this mead brought them life ransom from the reef, or Suttungr's mead, or liquor of Hnitbjorg. Then ^gir said: "These seem to me dark sayings, to call poesy by these names; but how did ye ^sir come at Suttungr's mead?" Bragi answered: "That tale runs thus. Odin departed from home, and came to a certain place where 9 thralls were mowing hay. He asked if they desired him to whet their scythes, and they assented. Then he took a hone from his belt and whetted the scythes. It seemed to them that the scythes cut better by far, and they asked that the hone be sold them. But he put such a value on it that whoso desired to buy must give a considerable price. None the less all said that they would agree, and prayed him to sell it to them. He cast the hone up into the air, but since all wished to lay their hands on it, they became so intermingled with one another that each struck with his scythe against the other's neck. Odin sought a night's lodging with the giant who was called Baugi, Suttungr's brother. Baugi bewailed his husbandry, saying that his 9 thralls had killed one another, and declared that he had no hope of workmen. Odin called himself Bolverkr in Baugi's presence. He offered to undertake 9 men's work for Baugi, and demanded for his wages 1 drink of Suttungr's mead. Baugi declared that he had no control whatever over the mead, and said that Suttungr was determined to have it to himself, but promised to go with Bolverkr and try if they might get the mead. During the summer Bolverkr accomplished 9 men's work for Baugi, but when winter came he asked Baugi for his hire. Then they both set out for Suttungr's. Baugi told Suttungr his brother of his bargain with Bolverkr, but Suttungr flatly refused them a single drop of the mead. Then Bolverkr made suggestion to Baugi that they try certain wiles, if perchance they might find means to get at the mead, and Baugi agreed readily. Thereupon Bolverkr drew out the auger called Rati, saying that Baugi must bore the rock if the auger cut. He did so. At last Baugi said that the rock was bored through, but Bolverkr blew into the auger hole, and the chips flew up at him. Then he discovered that Baugi would have deceived him, and he bade him bore through the rock. Baugi bored anew, and when Bolverkr blew a second time, then the chips were blown in by the blast. Then Bolverkr turned himself into a serpent and crawled into the auger hole. But Baugi thrust at him from behind with the auger and missed him. Bolverkr proceeded to the place where Gunnlod was, and lay with her 3 nights, and then she gave him leave to drink 3 draughts of the mead. In the first draught he drank every drop out of Odrerir, and in the second he emptied Bodn, and in the third Son, and then he had all the mead. Then he turned himself into the shape of an eagle, and flew as furiously as he could. But when Suttungr saw the eagle's flight, he too assumed the fashion of an eagle, and flew after him. When the ^sir saw Odin flying, straightway they set out their vats in the court, and when Odin came into Asgard, he spat up the mead into the vats. Nevertheless he came so near to being caught by Suttungr that he sent some mead backwards, and no heed was taken of this. Whosoever would might have that, and we call that the poetaster's part. But Odin gave the mead of Suttungr to the ^sir, and to those men who possess the ability to compose. Therefore we call poesy Odin's booty and find, and his drink and gift, and the drink of the ^sir. Then said ^gir: "In how many ways are the terms of skaldship variously phrased? Or how many are the essential elements of the skaldic art?" Then Bragi answered: "The elements into which all poesy is divided are 2. ^gir asked: "What 2?" Bragi said: "Metaphor and metre." "What manner of metaphor is used for skaldic writing?" "3 are the types of skaldic metaphor." "Which?" "Thus: first, calling everything by its name; the second type is that which is called substitution; the third type of metaphor is that which is called periphrasis, and this type is employed in such manner. Suppose I take Odin or Thor or Tyr or any of the ^sir or elves, and to any of them whom I mention I add the name of a property of some other of the ^sir, or I record certain works of his. Thereupon he becomes owner of the name, and not the one whose name was applied to him; just as when we speak of Victory Tyr, or Tyr of the Hanged, or Tyr of Cargoes. That then becomes Odin's name, and we call these periphrastic names. So also with the title Tyr of the Wain. But now one thing must be said to young skalds, to such as yearn to attain to the craft of poesy, and to increase their store of figures with traditional metaphors, or to those who crave to acquire the faculty of discerning what is said in hidden phrase. Let such an one, then, interpret this book to his instruction and pleasure. Yet one is not so to forget or discredit these traditions as to remove from poesy those ancient metaphors with which it has pleased chief skalds to be content, nor, on the other hand, ought Christian men to believe in heathen gods, nor in the truth of these tales otherwise than precisely as one may find here in the beginning of the book. 2. Now you may hear examples of the way in which chief skalds have held it becoming to compose, making use of these simple terms and periphrases, as when Arnor Earl's Skald says that Odin is called All Father. Now I'll tell men the virtue of the terrible Jarl, All Father's song surf streams, late my sorrows lightened. Here, moreover, he calls poesy the song surf of All Father. Havardr the Halt sang thus: Now is the flight of eagles over the field; the sailors of the sea horses hie them to the Hanged God's gifts and feasting. Thus sang Viga Glumr: With the Hanged God's helmet the hosts have ceased from going by the brink; not pleasant the bravest held the venture. Thus sang Refr: Oft the Gracious One came to me at the holy cup of the Raven God; the king of the stem ploughed sea's gold from the skald in death is sundered. Thus sang Eyvindr Skald Despoiler: And Sigurdr, he who sated the ravens of Cargo God with the gore of the host of slain Haddings of life was spoiled by the earth rulers at Uglo. Thus sang Glumr Geirason: There the Tyr of Triumph himself inspired the terror of ships; the gods of breezes that favor good men steered them. Thus sang Eyvindr: Gundul and Skugul Gauta Tyr sent, to choose from kings, who, of Yngvi's kin, should go with Odin and be in Valhall. Thus sang Ulfr Uggason: Swiftly the far famed rideth, the foretelling god, to the fire speeds, to the wide pyre of his offspring; through my cheeks praise songs are pouring. Thus sang Thjodolfr of Hvin: The slain lay there sand strewing, spoil for the single eyed dweller in Frigg's bosom; in such deeds we rejoiced. Hallfredr sang thus: The doughty ship possessor with sharpened words and soothfast lures our land, the patient, barley locked wife of Thridi. Here is an example of this metaphor, that in poesy the earth is called the wife of Odin. Here is told what Eyvindr sang: Hermodr and Bragi spake Hropta Tyr: Go ye to greet the prince, for a king who seemeth a champion cometh to the hall hither. Thus sang Kormakr: The giver of lands, who bindeth the sail to the top, with gold lace honors him who pours God's verse mead; Odin wrought charms on Rindr. Thus sang Steinthor: Much have I to laud the ancient maid, though little, liquor of the valiant load of Gunnlod's arm clasp. Thus sang Ulfr Uggason: There I think the Valkyrs follow, and ravens, victorious Odin to the blood of holy Baldr; with old tales the hall was painted. Thus sang Egill Skallagrimsson: No victims for this to Vili's brother, the high god, I offer, glad to behold him. Yet hath Mimir's friend on me bestowed amends of evil, which I account better. He has given me the art, he, the wolf's opposer, accustomed to battle, of blemish blameless. Here he is called High God and Friend of Mimir, and Adversary of the Wolf. Thus sang Refr: Swift God of Slain, that wieldeth the snowy billows' wave hawks, the ships that drive the sea road, to thee we owe the dwarves' drink. Thus sang Einarr Tinkling Scale: 'Tis mine to pour the liquor of the Host God's mead cask freely, before the ship's swift speeder; for this I win no scorning. Thus sang Ulfr Uggason: His steed the lordly Heimdallr spurs to the pyre gods builded for the fallen son of Odin, the all wise Raven Ruler. This is said in Eiriksmal. What dream is that, quoth Odin? I thought to rise ere daybreak, to make Valhall ready for troops of slain. I roused the champions, bade them rise swiftly benches to strew, to wash beer flagons, the Valkyrs to pour wine, as a prince were coming. Kormakr sang this: I pray the precious ruler of Yngvi's people o'er me to hold his hand, bow shaking. Hroptr bore with him Gungnir. Thoralfr sang this: the mighty one of Hlidskjalf spoke his mind unto them, where the hosts of fearless Hrokkr were slaughtered. Thus sang Eyvindr: the mead which forth from Surtr's sunk dales the strong through spells swift flying bore. So sang Bragi: 'tis seen on my shield's surface how the son of the father of peoples craved to try his strength full swiftly 'gainst the rain beat snake earth circling. Thus sang Einarr: since less with Bestla's offspring prevail most lordly princes, then thou, my task is singing thy praise in songs of battle. Thus sang Thorvaldr Blending Skald: now have I much in the middle grasped of the son of Bor, of Buri's heir. End of Skaldskaparmal, Section 2. Recording by Expatriate in Bangor, Maine.